So today I'm mixing up some acrylic in the hope that I can make it behave like an enamel paint. And by that I mean I want it to be quite viscous and quite shiny so that I can pour it think like Jackson Pollock, where it will maintain a line of pouring from a bottle, and so I can create some drip paintings. And then also thinking about when it floods out, it retaining that sheen and mixing in an interesting way. So I've decided to make two colours initially. Um, I've made a batch of orange earlier on, which I'm calling orange enamel acryl. And basically it's got some different mediums in there and a mix of different oranges. And what I'm going to show today is mixing up a turquoise, a kind of greeny turquoise. So I'll take you down onto the workbench. So in terms of the colours, I've got basically going to use over some leftover paint, use up some leftover paint. So I've got some of the golden phthalo blue green shade, cerulean blue, the chromium one, there's a little bit of that left. Phthalo green yellow shade. I thought I'd try the zinc white to lighten it up to get the mix. And I might put a bit of this fluorescent chartreuse in there. I've also got some teal standing by and some cobalt turquoise. Quite like the idea of putting a little bit of high flow in there because it's so pigmented and it has a little bit of a shine to it. And there's something about the viscosity in these as well, which I like. So I may put a dash of that in there as well. So those are colours. And then I've got regular golden gloss medium, some clear tar gel, which is very thick. And the other end of the spectrum, some GAC 100, which is very runny. So I can use all three of those to balance out and get the consistency that I want. And then I'm going to be putting it into one of these bottles with one of these tip applicators. So let's get some colour in there. Start with the cerulean blue because I've only got a bit of that left. Yeah, I'll get a bit more of that later. And then we'll put some of the phthalo blue green shade in there. And some phthalo green yellow shade. Those are mix. So that's giving me quite a strong sort of teal colour with a very green undertone to it. And I'm going to loosen that up with start a bit of gloss medium. And normally when I'm mixing my paints, I would put some water in, but for these, I'm not going to put any water in there. Well, let's pop a bit of this fluorescent in there. See what happens with that. Ooh. That livens it up a bit. That's pushed it quite green. Probably a bit more green than I want. So we'll put a bit more of the phthalo blue in there. As you can see, I'm not measuring any of this. I never really go too exact with my mixes. I prefer to do it a little bit by chance, a little bit by instinct. And I quite like the challenge of, sometimes I'm trying to refill an existing bottle and I'll be looking to match the colour as close as I can. And I think it's good practice to be able to do it by manually. But obviously you could measure it out if you wanted to be able to repeat it exactly. Okay, so I'm going to loosen this right up now with some of the gack. See how runny that is. This is also to extend the paint a bit. And of course it gives the impression of making it lighter, but because it will dry clear, that's a little bit of an illusion at this stage. But once it all mixes in, that effect is dissipated somewhat. Now at this stage, it is much, much darker than I want. So I am going to add some of the white. And I haven't really used the zinc white before. I don't know if it's going to have quite the effect that I want, but we'll see. It feels very different to the titanium white. It feels a lot smoother somehow. Fine titanium white can feel a little bit chalky. And a bit. The reason I didn't want to use titanium white for this is because I think it has a little bit of a dulling thing to it. By which I mean that it could adversely affect the properties that I'm trying to get with this viscosity and shine with this particular batch of paint. And I'm quite liking the colour of that. Not mixed in yet, but it's not as light as I want it, so I'm going to add a bit more of the zinc white. Amazing how much white you can put in and not feel a huge amount of difference, but it is getting a bit lighter. It's getting closer to where I want it. There's something quite therapeutic about mixing paint. And I find if I'm having one of those days where I'm procrastinating over getting started with a painting, then sometimes just mixing a bit of colour, I find it's a good way back again. I'm going to loosen this up again with a bit more of the gack. I do want it to be quite runny. And I haven't added any of the tar gel yet, but I will do in a minute. I mean, I do wonder sometimes whether, we're using these different consistencies effectively cancel each other out a bit. But I'm hoping that the tar gel, it's so stringy, and that's something that I want as a property of this paint, to have that sort of skein can form as you pour it out of the bottle. At the moment, it's quite thick, and it's not really sort of pouring. There's some of the gloss in there. And I know I could just go out and buy some fumes. But one of the things that puts me off a little bit is the fact that they are quite unpleasant to use, the oil-based enamel paints. They're slow drying and quite toxic fumes. You really need to work with them in a well-ventilated place. And flammable, which, is always a bit of a concern. So I thought, well, why not see if I can get the acrylic to do something similar to the properties that I want. The one thing I am going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of the orange that I've already mixed up into here, just to spice it up a little bit. It's just a really good colour. So I'm just going to grab a piece of paper. Something simple. Not bad. I like that. Yeah, it's still very transparent because I've used the zinc white, which is quite nice. And then if I put a little bit of the orange with it, which is also quite transparent. Yeah, I think that could be quite interesting together. So we'll go with the colour as it sits. And I'm going to start adding a bit of the clear tar gel to it now. So put a decent amount of that in. And it feels a little bit wasteful, but I'm going to get rid of that bit of the top because it will glue the lid on. That is so viscous. A good mix. And then the tar gel just adds a whole other level of glossiness to this, I like. That's feel quite thick at the moment still. But now already you can start to see, well, that's still clumping a bit because I haven't mixed it well enough yet. It's forming that skein, that line I wanted. Can't really see it from here. Let me just change the camera for a second. So, move that. Okay. So that's what I'm looking for, that continual line when you do the pour. It still feels a bit thick at the moment. So I'm going to add a little bit more of the GAC 100 in there to loosen it up a bit. It's still quite thick, a bit more gloss medium in there. I think it's testament to how good the pigments are in these golden paints that you can add so much of the medium and the colour is still really vibrant. And a bit more vigor. Just want to loosen it off a little bit more, but I don't want to add water to it. I'm just going to fold them in. I'm making a cake. Nice turquoise cake. I don't know why, but I just really enjoy mixing paint. I'm very satisfying about it. I think it's because when I'm mixing paint, all the possibilities start to run through my mind of what I could do with it. Painting's like a week. Right, that's running quite nicely now. That's where I want it to be. Okay, so we're ready to decant it into the bottle now. This is a bit that can get a bit messy, but these funnel things are brilliant. Okay, so we're going to go for the pour method. Hopefully it works. Whoa, there we go. I'm just going to slow that down a bit, give it a chance to start settling in. Here we go. This is thicker than the orange, but I think the starting point was thicker because these paints, the blues and the greens that I've used here, were all heavy body. Whereas with the orange, I was using System 3, which was more of a medium body. But sometimes I just have to give it a bit of encouragement. Luscious viscous paint. The other reason for using the tar gel, and I don't know how, I haven't got a lot of tar gel in there. I don't know how much this will actually work, but one of the things about the tar gel is the way that it holds shape. So if you pour straight out of the bottle onto the piece and make your pattern that way, the tar gel will hold its shape quite well after it dries. looking quite full now. Got a little bit more paint than I was expecting to have. Encourage that into the pot. Which is possible. That's holding its shape nicely. Right, transparent. But once you put it on thick, then it looks quite opaque. Very glossy. I don't know if you can quite see the shine on camera. Be interesting to see how glossy it is when it's actually dry. But what I'm going to do is put a sample onto one of these. So these are aluminium sample panels. And let's just the other thing I like about it, when you've got this kind of viscosity, is you can get this decalcomania effect very easily. And then it will hold these branchy shapes once it's dry. What we're going to do on this one, pour a little bit of that one. It's thick. Spread that right out to the edges of the pan. And once it's dried, for an extra glossy finish, self-leveling gel works on these quite nicely as well. Layer of turquoise. And I'm not actually going to put this down yet, because if I do, I won't be able to pick it up again. The easiest thing in the world to do. It's not going to happen. So put that on there. Right. Thin it out. This is thin out orange. So yeah, let's go. It does move when you shift it around, but it's moving quite slowly because of the viscosity. And I think that's in part because of the gel. So what I'm going to do with this is I could leave it like that and let it dry as it sits, but I'm actually going to take a print from it onto another panel. And you feel the pull from it. I quite like that. So we've got a bit of decalcomania, a little bit of mixing. So I'm going to leave that to one side and let that one dry. And I've got another panel here. I mixed up a batch of green the other day, just a small batch. So I'm going to use that as well. Get another print of this. I quite like these two colours together. A bit more in here. Yeah, I've had these aluminium panels for a long time. I bought them um, originally to use as colograph plates. Covered them with satin material and um, used different gels on top of them, and then used them for colograph printing. But after a while, I decided that I wanted to experiment a little bit more with the aluminium panels. So they've been sitting in my studio doing nothing for a while. And then I suddenly thought, perfect, this would be a good surface to test this enamel like paint on. Oh, I like the way that's peeking through. Early in shape. To get it just right. There we go. That's not bad. So we'll let that dry. Okay. And there's another one that I experimented with the other day. And I love this pattern, but I'm now intrigued to see what it would be like if I cover that up and scrape back. So, um, tingly white paint somewhere in a minute because it's quite warm and dry here today, and I don't want to use it. I could use it as a basis for another mix, and in fact, what I might do is perhaps put some more white in there and make a lighter variation. I was going to say this is a bit like icing a cake, but I've never really iced a cake, so anyone who makes cakes is watching this would probably think that's not how you ice a cake. And then I'm just going to scrape back through. Yeah. A bit. If you can see that very well on the camera, that little lighter bit there is gorgeous. Why have I never done this before? This is so much fun. A long time ago, I had a go at paint pouring, and I just did not like the results. The paints I was using came out quite sort of matte finish, and they looked great when they were wet, but as soon as they dried, they just lost all of those properties that I loved. So I'm hoping that won't be the same with this, but I think the secret with this is keeping the high shine. That's one of the things that makes the colour sort of pop. I mean, in terms of value, it's all very mid-tone, but I can always add white on later on. Of course, I could add some white now. Now I've mentioned it, I think I'm going to. Since we're in experimental mode today, if I can find my white fluid acrylic. I'm pretty sure that this will dry a little bit matte, and that's okay. Because as I say, I can, once it's all dry, put some gloss, some nice high shine over the top. Right, let's give that a go. See, that is not, it's drippy, yes, but it doesn't have that pull that the tar gel provides it with. So I'm already thinking I need to mix up a batch of white with the tar gel. Yeah, I don't like that so much. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the piece of paper from earlier. Yeah, I like that a bit better. And let's put a little bit more this through. Now that's interesting. So that is actually so interesting. That's forming little tiny cells, like you would get in paint pouring a little bit. I think that's because the viscosity of the fluid acrylic mixing, or really not quite mixing, with the viscosity of the paint that's got all the gels in it, is causing that sort of bubbling. Really interesting. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to go away and mix a bit more wine into the remains of that bowl and make another little um, on top. And I'll post the results later.